They drew a circle and shut me out. A heretic, a rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wits to win. We drew a circle and took them in.
Welcome to the Unitarian Church. My name is Nathan. I'm one of your ministers. I'm pleased to welcome you here today. If you're a visitor, we're glad that you're here. We're doing something special today. Well, first of all, if you like this service, there's a little button you can click share, and then other people can find out about it. There's something interesting we're trying. We're making available a Zoom room for people who want to watch this service live with other church members. You just go to the website, and there's a link right there for the Zoom link. So if you want to watch it with other people, you are welcome to. Glad that you're with us today. This is actually candidating week, and we have Jason Wesley, a member of the search committee, to tell you more about it.
Good morning, UCBR. Today officially begins candidating week. Per the UUA guidelines, Reverend Nathan Ryan will serve as the senior minister for this entire week. Therefore, he will handle today's service as well as service next Sunday, November 22nd. The purpose of candidating week is for congregants to speak with, listen to, and ask questions to Nathan. We will have a series of meetings that will be hosted via Zoom. The list of meetings is available on the church's website under the News tab. Some meetings are open discussion, and some have designated themes or topics. Again, the full list is on the church's website. Just for your information, there are 2 meetings today. There's a meeting after church at 11:30. It is an open conversation during the coffee hour. There'll also be a meeting tonight at 7 p.m., and the topic for that meeting is pastoral care. Tomorrow, Monday the 16th, there's an open conversation at 12:30, and again at 7 p.m. tomorrow, there is a discussion with the topic, being raised and raising UUs. There's no need to register for these meetings. Simply click on the link for the meeting that you'd like to attend at the appropriate time. Next Sunday, November 22nd, we will have a congregational meeting via Zoom at 11:30. The purpose of the meeting is to vote on whether to call Reverend Nathan Ryan as our senior minister. We will need a quorum for this meeting. A yes vote is to call Reverend Ryan as our senior minister. A no vote is signifying that you do not wish to call Reverend Ryan as our senior minister. Per our church's bylaws, a candidate for senior minister must get 80% of the vote to be called by the church. If that 80% threshold is not met, that would end the process for our internal candidate, and we would then move to an outside search. Please make every effort to attend and cast your vote for the future of our church. The search committee thanks you for your involvement in this process so far, and we look forward to an active and exciting candidating week.
God resolved at the outset that she wanted every human to participate in the afterlife. But the plans weren't thought out to completion, and immediately she began to run up against some confusion about age.
How old should each person be in the afterlife? Should this grandmother exist here at the age of death, or should she be allowed to live as a young woman, recognizable to her first lover, but not to her granddaughter?
God decided it was unfair to keep people the age. God finally landed on an ingenious solution while watching light diffract through a prism.
So when you arrive here, you are split into your multiple selves at all possible ages. The you that existed as a single identity is now all ages at once. These pieces of you no longer get older, but remain ageless into perpetuity. The yous have transcended time.
This takes some getting used to. The different beams of you might run into each other at the grocery store, like separate people do in earth life. Your 76-year-old self may revisit his favorite creek and run into your 11-year-old self. Your 28-year-old self may break up with a lover in a diner and notice your 35-year-old self visiting that spot, lingering on the air of regret, hanging over the empty seat.
Typically, the different yous are happy to see each other because they possess the same name and a shared history. But the yous are more critical of yourselves than they are of others, and so each you quickly identifies habits that get under your skin.
It's a fact of afterlife. Don't be surprised to discover that after decomposition into your different ages, the different yous tend to drift apart. You discover that the you of 8 years old has less in common than expected with the you of 32 and the you of 64.
The 18-year-old you finds more in common with other 18-year-olds than with your 73-year-old you. The 73-year-old you doesn't mind a bit, seeking out meaningful conversations with others of the same generation. Beyond the name, the yous have little else in common.
But don't lose hope. The shared resume of life parents, birthplace, hometown, school years, first kiss has a magnetic, nostalgic pull. So once in a while, the different yous organize a gathering, like a family reunion, bringing together all your ages into a single room. At these reunions, the middle-aged will definitely pinch the cheeks of the young, and the teenagers will politely listen to the stories and advice of the elderly. These reunions reveal a group of individuals touchingly searching for a common theme. They appeal to your name as a unifying structure.
But they come to realize that the name existed on earth. The you that moves serially through these different identities was like a bundle of sticks from different trees. They come to understand with awe the complexity of the compound identity that existed on earth.
They conclude with a shudder that the earth you is utterly lost, unpreserved in the afterlife. You are all these ages, they concede, and you are none.
You were all these ages, they concede, and you were none.
There are a few things to mention today during the Stones portion of the service. Normally we honor veterans Sunday before or after Veterans Day, and we couldn't do that because you aren't here. Also, normally later in the month, essentially next week, we do a Transgender Day of Remembrance for all those who, trans people who were killed, probably just because of who they were. So I just want to name both of those in the Stones moment. Also, a little later, I list in, it was a recording I made on Thursday, or Friday, where I list all of the members and friends of this church that died during the pandemic, and I left out Steve Campo, so I want to name his name in the service as well. And today we have the death of a parent and a father and a father-in-law and a grandfather of a family in this church. Lee Wesley died this week after a long fight with cancer. So we hold him and his family and the churches that he served and the community at large in our hearts today. I did this out of order. Now is the time where we place stones. I'll ask you to type into the chat whatever is on your mind, whatever's on your heart today that you would like a stone placed for. And I will place them in absentia. And now we say together, with hope to make this a better world, we light this flame. Its light is a symbol of the power of love.
We were founded by a courageous and intentionally racially integrated group of people. They chose the Unitarian denomination in part because Unitarianism is intentional about placing social and political issues within a religious context, a context that inspires us to be better citizens and better human beings. We are a larger congregation with potentially great outreach. We are more complex, but want to maintain a supportive community that reaches all who come here. We want to stay joyful, musical, and fun-loving. We still want to take on the social and political issues that we believe will make this a better world.
Welcome to the first Sunday of Candidating Week. Traditionally, this is the start of the week where a congregation gets to know its new ministerial candidate as the congregation discerns whether or not to call that minister. This week is a little different for a few reasons. First, this stupid pandemic means we can't gather like we normally would. So this means virtual worship and a bunch of Zoom conversations rather than meetings in person. But we aren't the only congregation going through this. Every single church looking for a minister in the spring had to do this candidating week over a computer, and they all made it through. The second thing is that only about once every year or two is there an inside candidate applying for the position. So I will encourage you to think of this as a chance to get to know me as a potential senior minister, not just get to know me as the person you've never met before, as you do your discernment. I'm calling this service Our Shared Beat for a few reasons. First, we have the Mike Foster Project as our guest musicians today. So a little bit of happenstance that I'm pretty happy about. We commissioned them to play for our brass service back over Labor Day, but because of some technical issues, we weren't able to get the videos ready for that Sunday. So we decided to sit on them until there was a good Sunday. We plan to use them today probably a month or more before it was ever decided this would be candidating week. I'm lucky it turned out this way, but I can't pretend it was entirely a plan. So we asked Mike Foster if he could record his band playing some songs, and he told us he thought he had a space available. Then on a Friday in September, Lee saw them pull up in the parking lot and start unloading their gear. They didn't tell us they were going to film in front of the sanctuary. I've blocked it out. Maybe you have too. But September was incredibly hot. They decided on their own to come and provide us music right in front of our own church building. Pay attention to how carefully they set up in the shade for the entire duration. I'm about to tread on some ground that is a little treacherous, so stick with me, would you? This is especially treacherous because I am white and I serve in a predominantly white institution. But this is not an entirely white institution. And this congregation exists in a culture where black and white cultures live in parallel side by side. Today we're going to hear a lot of culturally black music. The idea of white supremacy, it's a really tricky one for a lot of Unitarian Universalists to understand. At the simplest, it's the idea that we have embedded into our culture the idea that white is superior to other cultures. And this manifests in forms of art or communication. Our goal as a religious community is to acknowledge that cultural differences exist and to turn them from a vertical hierarchy into a horizontal acknowledgement of difference. So what I'm about to share is tricky because it could seem like white tourism, a white attempt to love every culture that isn't mine as a way to further my own cognitive dissonance of my own, of where I come from. I hope it will not come across that way. Instead, I hope you will see it as a celebration and appreciation of another parallel culture that I grew up around, and some of you are a part of, and many of you grew up around. And this church is immersed among. The example I'm going to use is from one of the... I had the book right here in my sadness corner. I was reading it today. I was going to show it to you. It was going to be this perfect... Anyway, let's pretend so I don't have to re-record this whole thing, and we can have that live element that I showed you the book. It's called the The Half Has Never Been Told. It is one of the most important books to my ministry that I've ever read. It's also one of the most important books I've ever read to help me understand what it means to be a white Louisianian in America. So in this book, the author, Edward Baptist, he retells American history, but he centers the perspective of African Americans. So the author, when he's talking about musical traditions of those kidnapped and enslaved, he said, "For not everyone was a virtuoso, but in contrast to the vast majority of whites, no one was a specialist non-performer. Everyone could sing and dance in the circle. Anyone willing to try could jump into the middle of a ring. Women and men both took center." So this is me now. If you look at this very idea of jazz and brass improvisation, where there's a unified chorus, but each instrument or performer is given a chance to shine, not based on their particular expertise alone, but on their ability to think quick on their feet. Way back in enslavement days, each person would jump in the middle of a literal circle of people and make up a verse to a song right there. If they did it well, they were celebrated, and if they stumbled over the words, then they were kind of made fun of. Baptist continues, "This was very different from white musical culture and white people's songs, which stuck to the same lyrics for decades. White musical ensembles played one rhythm at a time. Their dancers followed steps that might as well be painted on the floor. White musical culture was a formation that approved those who marched in time. Black culture was a ring with space in the middle for anyone willing to try their step." And that's the idea I'm trying to invoke today. This idea that all of us can jump into the circle and try our hand at music and and meaning making and religion making. This week is not about me, although there's going to be a lot more discussion about me than I'd probably like. This week is really a discussion of your church, your community, your church home, and where you want to go as a religious people together. The search committee spent more than a year talking to you. They did this through casual conversations before the shutdown, and they did it in more official ways through a congregation-wide survey, through cottage meetings, through targeted focus groups, all while everyone was locked in their homes. And they really wanted to make this work, to hear from as many of you as possible. They read your feedback, listened to your feedback. They synthesized and condensed it into a document that they call a congregational record, which you can read on their search site. This congregation record is the search committee's answer to more than 50 questions. This is then matched with what the UUA calls the Ministerial record, which is available on my website, which is also about 50 questions and more than 20 pages of really interesting stuff to read. Anyway, they put all of this work into identifying who you are so that they can better understand what you want in a senior minister. So today I thought, in lieu of traditional readings in the service, it was more important to hear excerpts from the search committee, what they've said that they heard you value, as we explore what this shared beat we all have is together.
We are committed to care for each other. We have a connected web of pastoral care and congregational care. We have a core group of experienced volunteer leaders and younger people who are eager to engage in leadership. We have a strong religious education program that is transitioning to family ministry. As we have responded to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are finding ways to provide connection and resources for families of all sizes and ages, including adults. We have a commitment to engage in our community. We are known as the church that shows up. We are willing to engage in self-reflection, and we have a decades-long dedication to work on social justice issues, including racial equality, poverty, LGBTQ rights, reproductive justice, gun violence prevention, policing and criminal justice reform, voting rights, immigration policies, and related concerns. We have a celebratory worship tradition. We are known for our joy, love, music, and creative services.
I decided to do the second part of the sermon right here in the worship pods for a few reasons. First of all, I'm not sure everyone understood when we announced last week what the plan is for these pods. We built these pods a few weeks ago, and we will use them when two things happen. First, this is easy, it's not raining when we are scheduled to have a service, which, by the way, will be Saturdays at 4. Once again, Saturdays at 4, not Sundays. We did this because we want you to know that this is not expected to be like a regular Sunday morning. Things are different, and this will be different. Think of this as a supplemental service. So not everyone feels safe coming to this, and we do not want to put pressure on people to come to this when period. So the online service is still where we're putting our primary efforts. So this is supplemental. The second reason the second thing you need to know to determine whether or not we're going to have a service outside is you can go to covidactnow.org, and click on Louisiana and then East Baton Rouge Parish and look at the graph. If we have been yellow for 5 days, we are cleared to worship. If we dip into orange at any point, we will not do the worship. And this week we were in orange for all except for Thursday. Also, there in the Friday or Saturday email, there will be a thing that says whether or not we are actually going to be doing the worship outside. So based on the trajectory of the numbers in the country, I don't think it happens soon. But Louisiana seems to be a little different. I don't know. We'll see. We've already had a few of these candidating week conversations, and there's something that keeps coming up. So I guess I should make you aware that this is going to be maybe the sad part of the service. For the most part, we can talk about the shutdowns without going too deep. I think for a lot of us, or at least for me, I cope with the trauma of this disease by keeping things superficial, or at least at surface level. Because even at surface level, things are scary and dangerous and sad and grief-stricken enough. But at some of these conversations, especially if it was in a smaller group, and we got to talking about the church and what you love about this church, it requires for us to remember everything that we have lost because of this disease. People ask if I'm worried about the church financially or in terms of membership, and I am not long-term at least. When we can gather together again in person, I think this church will be so happy that there will be a natural boom. But in the meantime, if the current members can stay engaged enough, even though watching services or reading the materials or doing your own spiritual practices amidst this uncertainty may seem harder than ever, if we can stay engaged financially and really put this church over the gap that is naturally occurring because of this pandemic, then when we get back together, it's going to be as exciting as anything. But the part that almost brings me to tears and reminds me of what's underlying this whole shutdown, the thing that seems to poke at the grief is what is happening when I picture us getting back together in the building for the first time. We will have to redo all of the bulletin boards and pick up things that we set down in February or March that remind us of March 2020. Advertisements for the Holy Y weekend, pictures of the search committee and the board, the Together Baton Rouge flyers, all of them will be about a year old. And when we get in there, some of our members and our friends will not be there with us. I came into the church every Sunday for my whole ministry, and I would see Ed Allen setting up chairs or making lemonade. He won't be there to do that when we gather. We still haven't been able to have a service for most of those who've died, so we're going to have to do that when we get back together. Although both of them had not been to church in a while, the seat right at the end of the middle section, just to the right of the middle section where Sam Ellisar sat, it will be empty. So will Stanley Duplantis' seat. Mary Lou Gubert will not be there. She used to sit right in the back, and she would talk with a group of friends before they would go to lunch bunch. She won't be there. Her partner Harold, after her death, he had to move back to California to be with his sons. Trudy Myers won't be there in the kind of front middle section. Look, there are so many deaths and losses to bring up, and they happen normally also. But we have a way to grieve them and sort of live in the world without them. But the world there is frozen until we get back. So when we come back in, it's going to be really hard and sad. Also, what I think is going to make me sad is every child that I have embedded in my brain at a certain age when we shut down will not be that age. All of the babies we saw in March will be able to walk and put stones in the chalice bowl. Preteens will be teens. Some of the seniors we won't meet again until they're adults. I've intentionally not said these things aloud in worship because they felt too sad and hopeless. But in my conversations with you, it's become clear that you want to talk about it, that it's on your heart. And I bring this up for a reason. This pandemic seems to thrive on invisibility. I am exhausted being scared of this disease. It feels unsustainable to keep remembering that it exists. I want to go back and do things the way I normally do them. I find myself bargaining, but since there is no one to bargain with, I'm bargaining with a virus. It goes nowhere. We've made it through the first of the 4 really hard holidays, and we have 3 left to go. That will be very sad and lonely and painful for many of us. I know many of you want to get together for Thanksgiving and Christmas and Mardi Gras. But we have to remember the pain of those we've lost and ask ourselves if we can do without this for 1 year. Which brings me back to these worship pods. Are you getting the services? What was I trying to say? Here's what I was trying to say. I remember somewhere that 87% of all churches are back worshiping indoors. And I've read that worship is one of the main spreaders of this virus. And I am constantly worried about how this church is doing. Am I serving you well enough? Are you getting the services, both worship and otherwise? Are we losing members and visitors and weakening ourselves while every other church is providing the spiritual and community support that their members are missing in person? And as I sit out here and I think about the end of this virus, I want you to think about what you were saying when you say that you were a member of a church that loved each other and loved the world so much that we gave up on in-person community and spiritual support, at least as we knew it, to save our lives and other people's. That we were a church who took your life seriously. I want us to be the church that said we will not pressure our family members to come inside for these really, really hard holidays because we know it might actually result in people dying. No, we are the church that will love you so much that we will do what is uncomfortable and isolating for us right now. We will gather again, and we will have time to grieve all those and all the things that we've lost since March. But we aren't there yet. So let's be the church that gathers in a way that makes the world safer and better. Would you join me in a moment of prayer and reflection? The God that we know when we see justice and kindness and love and compassion, be with us on this day. And hold this congregation, all those who are afraid or sad or angry or hopeful, wherever our people are, hold us. Hold all those who are fearful because of how their life is going or because of an identity they chose or didn't choose, because things feel precarious. Hold all those who want security, who want a world where they know what's happening. Help us to be more patient and more kind and more loving to everyone we're around. We know that justice is coming and love is coming. So let us be open to that. Help us to be the people who help heal the world. Amen.
We live our values and our commitment to be a welcoming, authentic community that meets members as they are through each act of caring for one another, both in times of joy and grief. When we challenge each other to find our better selves and to live our best life. By being the church that shows up when we stand on the side of justice, even in the face of opposition. And in our weekly renewal of our commitment to make this a better world. In addition to our Black Lives Matter signage, our church has been a major force in Together Baton Rouge, which is a genuinely interracial group with some 40 institutional members. Much of our work for social and racial justice takes place through TBR. On the ground, getting out the vote for a public bus transit funding initiative and other elections. Creating and advocating for policy changes at the local level in such areas as industrial tax exemptions, payday loans, food deserts, police reform, and aid to flood victims. Our former senior minister served on the executive committee of TBR. Additionally, we have taken up immigration issues in the past year, Our members have driven people released from detention centers to bus stations, met incoming buses from Texas with migrant workers from Central America to feed and acknowledge them, and are sponsoring a Honduran family of asylum seekers to help them become stable. UCBR has long been active on LGBTQ issues, including annual participation in local Pride Fest. We have been the meeting place for PFLAG and hold an annual Transgender Day of Remembrance with that group. We have trans-friendly signage in our church, and the church is enrolled in trans inclusion congregation training. Finally, we participate in Days for Girls, an organization that provides feminine hygiene kits for indigent girls and women the world over. And we are a founding member of the local Interfaith Federation, which provides free lunches every weekday at the Holy Grill. Our members volunteer regularly to help serve food to needy families.
So normally when we're all here together to experience this, I wouldn't have to say it, but I'm going to say it. So during a part of the service, a cold front just kind of pushed through, and it's sunny and cold here and rainy and hot here. So I just wanted you to know that. And also I have, we're in the middle of our pledge drive, although technically we're supposed to be done with it, but we're not. A home for all people. And I pulled the numbers. So right now, 101 of you have turned in pledges, and there are 253 still to go. Here's the good news, and this is why I'm excited about this church. 74 of you increased your pledge for a total of $50,219 extra dollars. So 74 of you have already increased that much. If the other 253 of you can find a way to increase for a total of just $35,000, we have the budget we want. So consider turning in your pledge so that we don't have to worry about if you're hearing us or not. And consider increasing it because we are close to doing some really, really cool things. We can be a church that makes it out of this pandemic more stable than we ever thought we would be, so we can actually do a lot of the ministry that you've been asking us to do for a long time, and treating our staff, giving them fair compensation, and just a whole bunch of really great stuff. So I'll now ask you to give very generously as this morning's offering is given and received.
Since I laid my burden down, I feel better, so much better. Since I laid my burden down, well, I feel like dancing. I feel good. Laid my burden down, I feel like dancing. You can dance, hallelujah.
We are the church that shows up for Together Baton Rouge, to lobby days at the Capitol for Planned Parenthood, at the Pride Parade, and for other issues. An unfortunate effort in Baton Rouge has been the effort of a group in the unincorporated parts of the predominantly white Southeast Parish area to break away and form a separate city of St. George with its own school system. The first effort failed in large part due to the very hard work of some of our congregation that joined with Better Together. The second effort was successful, but the formation of the city of St. George is now held up in court. Race and poverty are major issues here, and the church engages with them both internally, beloved conversations, dialogues on race, and externally on many fronts, but primarily through Together Baton Rouge. Members participate in activism on both the local and state levels to improve racial justice and conditions for all the historically marginalized. Our congregation desires to be out front when it comes to social justice issues in the community, and we need strong leadership to make sure we continue to grow in these areas.
This church is who we were. It is who we are, and it is who we will be. All of these realities are still alive in this moment right now. This is a church dedicated to radical inclusion right from its beginning. This is a church that truly cares about each other and strives to do better. I want to be a part of a church like that. That's why I shared part of the reading earlier about the afterlife from David Eagleman. In his book, Some, he comes up with 40 different stories of what he thinks could be the afterlife. It's this idea that we aren't just the congregation now, but it's the congregation viewed through the prism of all what was. See, I located myself in the archives, so you can see some of the archives while we're here. What was and all what we can be. I love that this church asks us all to jump in the middle of the circle, to not necessarily only rely on experts. Actually, I like the fact that this church embraces the idea of jumping in the middle of the circle and embraces the idea of musicians who are studied and tried. I like the combination of the two. I love that we are not just waiting for our social justice saviors to come and fix everything, but for us to get in there and make this all work together. And we have some work to do. I mean, every institution has work to do, but this church is poised to be a keystone congregation in this region. We can work towards being a congregation so dedicated to understanding the cultural and institutional barriers to being Unitarian Universalists that we can start to build a church that truly reflects all of Greater Baton Rouge. But we can be the church that reflects the Baton Rouge and the Plaquemine and St. Francisville and Scotlandville and Denham and Baker and Zachary and Gonzales and every other city that you call home. We can be a church that reflects what those cities could be. Cities that you were promised before you were even born. We can get there. We can get there together. There's this one part of the congregational record that stood out to me. I was so excited when I read it. I called a colleague to brag about it. There are two questions in the record that I'm bringing up: recent successful work of the congregation and the work within the congregation which is slow, stuck, or not attended to. And these questions usually have internally and externally focused answers, respectfully. Usually the recent successful work is something like our Buildings and Grounds Committee has done such and such repairs, or we've taught ourselves this class, or something they're proud of that they've done internally. You know, we've balanced the budget. We had a good stewardship drive. The work that is stuck is usually something that insulates the congregation from the outside world. I've read over and over congregations answering this question in ways that sort of let them off the hook. They say something about how hard it is to live in the city they live, as if merely living among people you think aren't like you, which is also a bit of cognitive dissonance, is somehow the end goal. And they're stuck trying to figure out how to live in this world that they so desperately want to be separated from. So let me say that another way. Usually the stuff congregations are stuck with is that it is stuff they are so stuck with that they're afraid to even acknowledge it. But there's something about trusting the ministers who are looking, trusting your own leadership to acknowledge, here's our church, here's where we succeed, and here's where we struggle, and to say it honestly and openly. It was so refreshing to hear it. I actually bragged to some colleagues about it. So I wanted you to hear from a member of the search committee the answers to those two questions.
Recent successful work of the congregation. Our Great Expectations capital campaign resulted in the remodeling of our sanctuary, our church grounds, our peace garden, and additions to our ministerial and other staff positions. Members of the church were very involved in recovery efforts from a major hurricane in 2005, a devastating citywide flood in 2016, and significant participation in 2016 protests resulting from the murder of an unarmed black man by a Baton Rouge police officer. The work within the congregation, which is slow, stuck, or not attended to. Increasing diversity, addressing and challenging institutional racism and white supremacy, membership development, lay leadership development, and full integration of youth and RE into every aspect of the church.
The search committee heard you. They heard you say that you want to do more to have a church that truly welcomes and loves all people. And the successes, a successful stewardship drive to improve our church, helping with Katrina and flood relief, and being committed to being a voice for justice in the community. That was your greatest success that you listed. Over and over, you told the search committee that you were proud of your work in Together Baton Rouge. You wanted a church where children could be raised in healthy and supportive ways. You wanted worship and music that was meaningful and helped you get through the week and through the year. You valued a church that truly cared for each other. So I'd like for you to picture what this church will or could look like when this whole pandemic is over. Imagine a church that is truly a home for all people. Imagine a place where you can know you are loved and safe no matter how hard the world is, that you will never go through this alone. When we gather together again, or actually, as we agree to make it through this pandemic together as a religious community through the hardest thing some of us have ever faced, what do you hope for this church? When this church takes off, when it flies away, and by that I mean when we let go of the way things used to be and say hello to a world that is more loving, more compassionate, more just, where do you want this church to fly off to?
I'll fly away to the place where all people truly love all people.
We have a vibrant, diverse, and celebrated music program.
Where equal justice is no longer fought for, but preserved.
To become an even better place for spiritual growth, emotional comfort, and meaningful engagement.
Truly diverse, spiritually charged, sacred, welcoming, affirming to all.
To a place when you walk through our doors, shoulders relax, you smile, and your mind says, This is it.
So, when I was living in Austin, and I was really homesick around Mardi Gras time, and so I went to a CD store back when they had CD stores, and I asked them to, where the good brass music is, the Mardi Gras music, and they said, I don't know, go to the Cajun section. It wasn't there. Then they said, well, I don't know, try world music. It wasn't there. I couldn't find it then. Contrast that with first Mardi Gras I was able to go to when I was back in Louisiana, and I got to hear that music, which is part of this culture for a long time. Contrast that with you and maybe where you were searching. You knew what you were looking for, but maybe you couldn't find it. You knew it existed, but they kept sending you to the wrong section. I hope this church feels like home to you. I hope that you are committed to make this church home for people who have yet to find us. And I hope that we can help you get through this week and every week. Amen. Go in peace.